Fucking I need some help with this. Mr. Power Armor!
What the fuck? Who the fuck are you?
No time to explain, I need your help!
Dude, what the fuck? Why'd you pull me out of Alola? I was on vacation!
I don't know, apparently we must have an arbitrary reason to do a co-op, so I just want to cut the bullshit and get straight to the point. You see, there's this video I want to cover, and I need some help with it, so what do you say?
Sounds retarded and a waste of time. Let's do it.
That's the spirit, but first I need to change my avatar. I was thinking of using Mawile, but since your avatar is Cynthia, I'm thinking of using Pokegirl as my avatar.
Don't worry, I got you covered. Let's see. No. Using her for fat material. No.
Nah, I could do it myself. There we go. Now we can begin with this shit.
XYZ, there is no foe too strong for me and you. XYZ, keep on fighting and we will break through. XYZ, the roaring skies above are crashing down and coming into view. XYZ, you must believe there is no dream too small.
Alright, before we begin, I want to say something directly towards Silver if he ever comes across this video, and I want to make this very clear to him. This video is by no means an attack towards you in any way, as my co-partner and I don't hold any ill feelings towards you, and I highly discourage anyone to harass you. The purpose of this video is for entertainment and to give criticism to your video, as both of us only have a problem with your video, and we'll be explaining that throughout this commentary. I know at the very beginning of your video, you said that your video contains personal opinions and potential bias, and to say this, I also want to make this clear to you as well. I get you want people to understand that these are your personal opinions, but just because it's your opinion doesn't mean your opinion is immune to any criticism and from anyone pointing out any flaws in said opinion. We're not here to change your opinion because that's not the point with this commentary, and you have every right to have that opinion. It's just that I see so many commentators do this, and more often than not, they'll just throw a hissy fit whenever someone criticizes their opinions. I just want to make this disclaimer clear to you so you can understand the purpose of this video, so no hard feelings. Anyway, now with that out of the way, we can finally start with the commentary. Are you ready, Mr. Power Armor?
No.
Alright, let's do this.
Coming to you from the heart of the Schmidt Grand Theater Hall in the heart of Serenade City, it's the first and only Silver League's Top 10 Losers of Gen 6 Awards Show! And here's your host,
He wish he had that audience.
Silver August!
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Now, Gen 6 has been a long, fascinating, and ultimately very enjoyable and fun generation. It's had plenty of ups and plenty of downs, both of which I covered in my pros and cons videos for X and Y and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, respectively. But I feel like as Gen 7 just looms around the corner mere weeks away, it's a better time than ever to look back upon the generation as a whole and see what Pokemon, trainers, or just aspects of the entire generation either met the hype, failed to meet the hype, in, well, as the title implies, the losers and winners of Gen 6. So yes, we'll see you guys in November for the winners of Gen 6, but for now, we're going to be giving out the rather dubious awards to those Pokemon, trainers, characters, or just traits in general that failed to meet the hype, failed to meet expectations, just completely underdelivered, whether they were poorly designed, bad stats, or just all of the above. We'll be tackling them here today.
And since this is such a special occasion, I should probably get dressed up for it. So where's my suit? Ah, that's better.
Wait a minute, why can't you just do that before you get on stage? Seems pretty unprofessional. Now, think about it. Why are these people here? Did they pay to see this? Did they came to see these kinds of awards about the losers in Gen 6? Why is there awards for losers?
I don't know what's worse, this or the 2013 Oscars.
Well, now that I'm all dressed up, let's start handing out those golden dubious disc awards.
Why are people cheering?
Number 10.
Politoed. Again. Yes. I am going to take one more jab at this amphibian. How many times have I already done that over the course of this generation? Politoed. Fucking Politoed. Oh, you. Politoed! Damn you, Politoed!
No, I'm gonna stop you right there. Is this even necessary? It just feels like you're panning out the video, and to someone who might be new to your channel will be totally lost with this. Also, if you've covered Politoed before, well, I'm gonna hold on to that thought and come back to it in a moment. For now, I'm just gonna skip this mess.
Oh, right. But I swear, this will be one of the last times because gosh darn it, he legitimately deserves a mention on this list. Because wow, what a fall from grace. From being the frustrating king of OU in Gen 5, to being the sheer bottom of the barrel in a generation that still sees weather use occasionally. Sand and sun still see use. Yes, sun, thanks to Charizard Y. But still, we don't see much hail, and we definitely don't see much rain, at least at a competitively viable level. Because suddenly, Politoed's own stats would have to factor, and even though he's a fantastic rain summoner, he's not the best Pokemon on his own when the rain will only last for about 3 turns by the time you actually switch the next Pokemon out.
It's
an
5
incredible
turns,
fall
not
from
3.
grace
Try to get it
that
right,
Politoed
numbnuts.
just did not bounce back from. Pardon the pun. So Politoed, this one's for you. You suck, I hate you, and I hope I never have to mention you ever again. Because I swear to Arceus, if Gen 7 does something to make you viable, there will be blood. And lots of wasabi. Because I hate wasabi. Just like you.
Okay, we get it. You hate Politoed. No need to shove it in our faces. I know you said that this video contains personal bias, and at least you admitted that, but that personal bias should be an excuse. The biggest problem I have with this particular entry is that it only feels like you put Politoed on this list because of sheer bias alone. I could get a certain hatred for a Pokemon, and maybe I could understand that there's something new to cover about Politoed, but I really gotta ask why is Politoed even on this list, other than your own personal bias, because it seems like to me you never really liked Politoed to begin with. While that's not an issue in itself, it just feels like you're making an excuse to put him on the list.
Number 9. Obama Snow. Oh, Obama Snow. After giving it a lot of thought, you seriously are a contender for probably the worst Mega of Gen 6. Because while Mega Glalie is questionable and kind of stupid looking, Refrigerate is an ability that will only get better with every generation as we get more moves, especially normal type moves, and he immediately has the potential to get any one of those and turn them into a killer ice type move. It's only a matter of time before he gets something that'll really make him awesome.
Yet, unlike Mega Glalie, Mega Abomasnow isn't a BL2 tier, which is basically a banlist for RU. If I remember correctly, Mega Glalie is a RU tier Pokemon, which means Mega Abomasnow isn't a better tier than Mega Glalie and can be considered somewhat better. I guess a personal preference thing, and Mega Glalie does have its uses over Mega Abomasnow, and you're not necessarily wrong with Refrigerate becoming a better ability over time, but this comparison really doesn't help your case that much. In all honesty, it just feels like you're underselling Abomasnow just for the sake of putting it on this list.
Number 8. Diantha. Now Diantha is pretty, there's no doubt about that, but what do we really know about her as a character? Well, she's a movie star and an icon in the Kalos region. You meet her in a cafe and she literally turns out to be the champion, and that's about it. I mean, even Cynthia had more characterization throughout the games and her appearances in the anime, and Cynthia, not counting Best Wishes, possibly had just as much screen time as Diantha did throughout the X and Y anime, and the X and Y anime feels like they really expanded her character, or they could have. She's really nice and really skilled, but I still don't really understand her as a character. She's kind of one note, really.
While I do agree that Diantha isn't a very interesting character, and she is a rare lackluster champion, but the problem I have here is the statement you said about her being a quote one-note character in the Pokemon anime. While I do admit that I haven't seen much of the X and Y anime, but after reading up her role in the anime on Bulbapedia, she seems to do a lot more than you let her out to be. I even asked a friend of mine that is a huge fan of the X and Y anime, and even he said that this statement was pretty bullshit. This isn't to say that Diantha doesn't have problems as a character, because really, she does, but my point still stands. I know it sounds like I'm nitpicking, which you're not wrong about, but I just feel like this explanation was just clumsy and not really well thought out, which is a problem in this particular entry and other entries throughout this list.
And this goes beyond just her character, her team is kind of weird. Gardevoir either feels like it was designed around her or she was designed around Gardevoir. And then she has both the fossils, Aurora's Fits and Tyranium, I guess, because you have one fossil, you might as well have both. And then a Gourgeist, okay. Goodra, sure, I'm sure she could see the beauty in a Goodra. And a Honlucha. Huh? Why a Honlucha? Really, why? I mean, older. As lame as many people could say he was as a champion, at least he had character that was very evident. At least his team really reflected his survivor man of the nature and the elements type of persona. His team reflected someone who would live in the wild for months at a time, just training with nature. Even Cynthia's team was kind of all over the place, but it really reflected her character and her wanting to discover mysteries of her region and just various traits like that. What does a Honlucha say about Diantha?
Well, I agree with you about Diantha's character not being shown well in the games. Does the idea of Diantha having a versatile team not come to mind? What with Blue, Red, Cynthia, Alder, and maybe if you argued Iris, one could see Game Freak has been creating champions with versatile teams to give the player more of a challenge. Save Diantha because XY suffers from a broken EXP share. And sure, you bring up how champions have a theme that's reflected by the Pokemon they use, even though that's never been the case. I mean, what's Red and Blue's theme supposed to be with their Pokemon? And to debunk this argument saying Diantha does not have a theme with her team, well, she does have one. Each of her 6 party members has a different stat as their highest stat, with her Lucha having high speed, her Tyrantum having high attack, her Aurora as having high HP, her Gorgeist having high defense, Goodra having high special defense, and her Gardevoir with high special attack. I mean, sure, it's not much, but it's something.
Other than possibly being a movie star that she needs a kung fu action sidekick, it's weird. And I really feel like it's a massive letdown to this generation that the champion is kind of flat. And in many ways, it actually kind of reflects the game of X and Y as a whole when you look back at it.
Okay, I needed to get this off my chest because the way you handle this segment bothers me. First off, citation needed. If you said that both Alders and Cynthia's team makes sense, then show us why. You show Diantha's team, but you don't show Alders and Cynthia's. It's a little more important than you think, and showing both of their teams would have helped your case. But you don't do that, and instead you expect us to take your word for it. And second, you dragged out this segment with side tangents that isn't really all that important to Diantha's character. I mean, are we talking about Diantha's character, or are we just comparing her to other champions? Because you said that Alder and Cynthia are better characters, and while I don't disagree with that, but how is this important in any way to Diantha's character? I do agree that her character isn't necessarily the strongest, and she is by far the weakest champion in Pokemon history, but you're not going too much in depth as to why her character is flat, and it just felt like you could play more about her team than her actual character. By the way, we'll be skipping his Delphox entry because there isn't really anything we could argue against. However, there is one thing I want to bring up from this entry.
You're basically a fire-type Gardevoir without the Mega, or a good ability, because Blaze is whatever, that's standard.
Please do keep this in mind, because this will be important later on in the video.
Number 6. Leftovers. Now, Leftovers isn't here because it's a bad item. Far from it. In fact, it's essential for basically every team.
Says it's a good item, yet the item manages to get on this list anyway.
But that's kind of the problem. Why is there only 1 Leftovers in the entire game? I don't get it. Why can't you just go to a place and buy more Leftovers like you can Life Orbs, Assault Vests? I don't get it. Why? Why is it that the only way someone can get more Leftovers is by either restarting their game or grinding a Pokemon with a pickup ability to level 100 and hoping you get really, really lucky? Cough, cough, Teddy Ursa.
How frustrating. It's not like they do this in every other game. Oh wait, save Pokemon Emerald Leftovers have always been a bitch to find in future Pokemon games. I mean, yeah, you can get one via Munchlax, but good luck finding one of those fat bastards, say Black and White, via trade.
Not only that, but there are other items that are much harder to get and are much worse. Good example is Rocky Helmet, which is something you can only get once in each game. At least with Leftovers, you could get another one via pickup ability. And sure, it's a bitch, but at least it's something.
I understand between Megastones, Z-Crystals, and just the abundance of items that they've been giving us, that we can very easily break the habit of our necessity for Leftovers as a hold item. But why is it not optional for purchasing? I really don't get that. Why is it that this item in particular had to be so hard to track down? It really escapes me what they were thinking, other than trying to break the habit. Which, sure, all power to them, but was it really necessary? So that, my friends, is why this is on the list. Not because it's a bad item, but because for some reason they had to make it absurdly hard to obtain, and that in itself makes you quite the loser, because really there's no essential reason for it. If you have 3 Leftovers on a team, your team is running the risk of being kind of uncreative and possibly easily run over, ironically enough. But at least let us buy more if we want them. Seriously!
What? Okay, sorry I have to point this out, but what happened to your foot? Oh wait, you blew it the fuck off! What a way to shoot yourself in the foot, Christ almighty! There was so much wrong with this entry that it's almost hard to believe. If you said that Leftovers was a good item, why is it even on this list? Especially if it's this high up. The only reason you give as to why it's on this list is because you wish it had more in the actual game. Not only is it a pretty small reason to put it on this list, but your previous entries like Politoed and Diantha could have been much higher, as you gave more of a reason why you put them on this list. I could go on more about this entry, but it's just me repeating myself, but man, you really fucked up with this entry.
Number 5. Avalug. Why do you do this, Game Freak? Why? Why do you insist on trying to make defensive ice types? They're ice! The point is they crack! They melt! Ice has always been symbolic of being fragile, of being something you have to be really careful with. Defensive ice types as a concept doesn't work. It never has, and it's yet to work as of this generation. Not to mention, Avalog is literally a walking table. Look at it. This is one of the dumbest designs I've ever seen. It is so stupid, it has not held up at all.
Well, Avalog is an iceberg. What else do you expect an iceberg to look like? If you look up what Avalog is based off of on Bulbapedia, you know that Avalog is based on tabular icebergs and their aircraft carrier, which is also referencing the Halak project. I know certain design taste is completely subjective, and you're right about that, but there's a reason why Avalog looks like that. Anyways, we'll be skipping the rest of its Avalog entry because we kind of agree that Avalog sucks, and almost every point he brought up we can actually agree on. So we'll just go into his number 4 entry.
Number 4. Aromatisse. It's a can-can dancing flamingo-esque Pokemon, which means the odds of getting that Flamingo Dodrio, or a good Flamingo Pokemon period, are kind of stacked against us. At least for Gen 7. Hey.
Hey, Silver, guess what? Aromatisse is not based on a flamingo. It might sort of look like one, but if you look on Bulbapedia, it doesn't say that Aromatisse is based on flamingos. It's partially inspired by flamenco dancers, but flamencos and flamingos aren't the same thing. Unless if you want a flamenco Pokemon.
Coupled with incredibly messed stats, a kind of alright move pool, and abilities that only get full proper use in, well, double format battles, which I suppose is fine for VGCs, but how often have you seen an Aromatisse used in VGCs? Aromatisse, I feel like he might have come a generation too early, because Gen 7 would give us the Oricorio.
Sky, what the fuck is going on?
Pyroar, Inigo! Pyroar, get me!
A Pokemon who has 4 different forms based on different styles of dance, who all have different typings and presumably different play styles. And the thing is, they actually do something with the concept of being based on dance. Aromatisse is just this bird that for no explicit reason is based on the can-can. I don't quite understand why, and now that we have Oricorio, it just brings home how disappointing the idea of Aromatisse is, when we could have had something like Oricorio in Gen 7 based on the can-can. They could do that, again, but it would be kind of redundant, and when you boil it all down, Aromatisse is just kind of meh, and easily one of the worst fairy types introduced in the generation that, well, gave us fairy types. And that in itself is quite the dubious honor.
I mean, it's not like Aromatisse was based off the can-can, and the can-can originated from France, which Kalos was based off, am I right? Am I right? Am I right?
Okay, I was gonna say this for later, but I might as well say it now because this is probably the worst offender. Your constant comparisons between different Pokemon is starting to bother me. While I have no problems with comparing to other Pokemon because some can actually help make a point, the problem here is that you're making baseless comparisons that doesn't disprove anything. This happened with your Abomasnow entry, your Delphox entry, and even your Diantha entry. You bring up one other Pokemon and not bring in anything else that could help your case. And this is probably the biggest problem with this segment. While Aromatisse and Oricorio are Pokemon based off of dance, they are 2 completely different Pokemon. One is a fairy type, and the other flying type with other types to go along with it. This wouldn't be so much of a problem if there were actual good comparisons. At least your number 9 entry, Abomasnow and Galele are Ice-type Pokemon with Mega Evolutions. At least your number 7 entry, Delphox and Gardevoir are Psychic Pokemon. However, Aromatisse and Oricorio aren't good comparisons other than that they're birds and are Pokemon based on dance and nothing else.
Number 3. X and Y story. Okay, so here's the thing. X and Y's story isn't bad, but it's poorly executed. Large chunks of X and Y didn't have anything to do with the story. In fact, we just had chunks where he would just dump huge amounts of exposition on us. You would see a little bit where you meet AZ, a little bit where you meet Lysandre, and then you would never see them again until the near end of the game where it would just exposition dump everything. Yes, the story of the war is very cool and raises a lot of interesting questions, but surely they could have done more to incorporate it into the story, not just literally make it a big exposition dump at the very end of the game. where you also get all of Lysandre's motivations and everything just dumped right there, just dropped. And it's like, okay, it's interesting in theory, but in execution, it's terrible.
While admittedly, Pokemon X and Y does have its fair share of problems with its story, being spoon-fed is not the case. Throughout the Kalos region, the player can meet traveling ministers who tell you about the Pokemon War, and thus you learn more about the world because of this. It gives the player a sense of world building. And sure, they don't sprinkle in the details that easily, but it's not like they're not there, you just had to look. You know, like in any good RPG. Also, Lysander's motivation, please, the second time you meet Lysander and throughout the game, all he goes on about is how people are bad and the world needs to be fixed and made beautiful because people are making it ugly and blah 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 blah. I'm Dr. Octopus, now get wrecked by Mega Gyarados.
Take that! And this is something I've discussed with my friends countless times when we look back at Gen 6. Gen 6 as a whole is a fantastic sandbox for being a Pokemon trainer and going to, say, well, the Silver League and battling your friends online. However, as RPGs, they're kind of lackluster because they're arguably too easy, and the story, even in Oris, isn't exactly the most engaging and thrilling thing in the world. Black and White and Black and White 2's biggest strength was how much effort they put into the story, into the characters. If we had that level of storytelling in X and Y, it would be amazing. But it's almost as if the failure of Black and White made them hesitant to put so much emphasis on the story. I don't know if there's really any correlation between the two, but it's an interesting point that crossed my mind because, like I said, Black and White, terrible meta, but great RPGs, a great solo experience for a Pokemon fan. While Gen 6 is a fantastic place to get into the competitive scene, but not the best place for your first time experiencing a Pokemon RPG story. It's kind of weird how it works like that.
And it all starts with X and Y, which set this precedent, and really, there's a good story there, but the execution is just not the best. And again, it doesn't help that the post-game is barely there. Yes, the looker missions are there, I've read the comments, but still, it's kind of meh. And go figure, the anime makes the story of Team Flare actually really engaging, really cool, and gave us the Z version that we will never ever have. Maybe.
Okay, I'm going to take less time criticizing this particular entry because there isn't really anything I could disagree with, but there's one underlying problem that I really should point out and express, as this is something that I'm very passionate about. While I'll give you that the story for X and Y, at least in the games, isn't necessarily the greatest and does have problems, such as the general pacing of the story, how underwhelming Team Flare is as an evil organization, and not very many memorable characters with only a few exceptions. However, my problem with this entry stems from you saying X and Y isn't a good RPG. For one, you seem to be forgetting one other important thing that makes a good RPG, and that being world building, which X and Y in any other Pokemon game does quite a bit. Some examples I can think of are Genesis Town, Tower of Mastery, and the one and only Luminous City. That's not even mentioning the Pokemon War, something that you brought up, but something like world building is really important for RPGs to give lore and depth to a game's world. Another issue is that if X and Y does have good gameplay and a good meta, well that also means that X and Y is a good RPG. A good RPG could have a bad story, but that doesn't take away that it's still an RPG, which more often than not what people seek. I know you said that the game is too easy, and you're not wrong, but the only reason why that's the case is because of EXP share, which is something you can turn off in the actual game. I don't know how many people knew about that, but you can't do that to make the game a bit more challenging.
I mean, if you prefer getting fucked in the ass without lube.
Well, he might be into that, but you don't know.
Number 2. The model of the battle tower in Oris. Yep, I'm going there at least one more time, because you know what? Nothing quite symbolizes my frustration with Oris quite like that model of the battle tower. Before X and Y even came out, back in Gen 5, we were all speculating and assuming that there would be a remake of the Gen 3 games. We didn't get it, instead we got Gen 6, which is all fine and dandy, but even during the months of enjoying X and Y, people were searching out clues of any sort of evidence that could suggest that Gen 3 remakes were happening. And then we got them. We got Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, which, to no one's surprise, was 2 versions instead of 1. But we were all assuming that it was going to follow the same trend that Heart Gold and Soul Silver started, where, yeah, it's 2 versions, but when you look at them closely, it's basically Crystal version broken up into 2 games, which we were fine with.
However, as more information came out, and they weren't announcing a battle frontier, we started to get scared. We saw the map, we saw that there was some kind of post-game thing, we were hoping that would lead to the battle frontier. It doesn't. There was no DLC, not at any point during the years that the game was out, nothing.
Pokemon never did DLC before, so why would they start now?
Oris is a frustrating game, because it's not quite a remake, it's not quite a retcon, and for what it's worth, it didn't need to be a remake of the Ruby and Sapphire storyline. It could have literally just been a new game that happens to take place in Hoenn. They could have honestly gotten away with that. Or heck, it could have been just a brand new region entirely that doesn't happen to have any new Pokemon, or they could have just pulled an X and Y 2 and had us, explore the southern half of Kalos. Since there was a huge chunk of region that just looks like there's supposed to be more places to explore there, especially with a train, it just doesn't do anything, and it's so weird.
And to me, cock teasing that the battle frontier is coming soon when we are hoping for a Z version, an Emerald version, a Delta Emerald, a Zeta Emerald, something.
Christ, what a whiny little shit. You mentioned how you expected Oris to be like Heart Gold and Soul Silver. And like Heart Gold and Soul Silver, they do the same story. You still fight the evil organization, you still save home from one of the weather trio, and you still fight Steven, and you pass go to get $200. But what about Emerald? That's what the Delta episode is for. Oh my fucking god. All this whining over a fucking tower. And what the fuck does the battle tower have to do with any of this? Oh, it symbolizes my anger. Get the fuck out of here with that art house shit. You try hard. This intro is such a fucking mess. You couldn't even keep it on a fucking topic. Holy shit. Okay, I'm done.
And people said that I get angry.
When we're left there, waiting, hoping, speculating for a Delta Emerald, a Zeta Emerald, Z version, something, and it just doesn't show up, it's frustrating. It's really frustrating, especially when the story to both games was kind of meh, and just that overall sentiment that this is a fantastic game for battling your friends, not the best for RPGs, and just that tower. That tower to me symbolizes all the frustrations I've ever had with Gen 6. But that's just me. Maybe they'll give us a Battle Frontier now that they know how much we really truly want it. A guy can dream, but getting your hopes up sometimes can lead to devastating disappointment.
Wow, I ain't gonna lie, but this is probably the worst thing on this list by far. Not only was it lengthy for something that could be set under a minute, but it's probably one of the most self-entitled rants I have heard in a long time. I really must ask this. Why is it even on the list? It's not a Pokemon, it's not a character, it's not even a story element. This is you just expressing your own high expectations, and the expectations turn into disappointment. I'm sorry, but is this the list about the top 10 losers, or the top 10 disappointments? Really, all this entry was is you bitching. At least with your other entries, minus the leftovers, they had something of substance. But this? Not even anything worth listening to. Honestly, listening to this entry was just hard to sit through. It dragged on, and the amount of complaining just made it worse. I don't want to be that guy right now, but it's just a freaking model that is made out of pixels. I get it, it's frustrating, but get that stick you call your disappointed expectations out of your ass. It's annoying to look at.
And now for the number one loser of Gen 6. The Grand
Why are they still cheering?
Paid audience.
This
Why?
award goes out to a Pokemon or a character who was a particular exceptional failure. The Grandmaster of sheer ineptitude. Whether they massively disappointed us, or just failed in every sense of the word. The nominees for the Grand Golden Dubious Disc Award are Flygon, the only Dragon-type Pokemon introduced in Gen 3 who did not get a Mega simply because the creative staff fully admitted they could not come up with an idea for it. And yet Mega Salamans and a walking stock market graph were acceptable ideas. Right.
So Flygon's here because it doesn't have a Mega Evolution. And it's a nominee for number one. I must ask, are these nominees or honorable mentions?
Ninetales, who similar to Politoed, had a weather summoning ability that was nerfed upon entering Gen 6. However, unlike Politoed, Ninetales would see itself completely usurped by Charizard, who despite maintaining their ×4 rock weakness upon Mega Evolution into Charizard Y, would prove to be a far better user of the Drought ability than Ninetales ever could. Able to battle just fine, and also assist its team along the way. It truly would be an unfortunate series of events for this Fox Pokemon.
Okay, seriously, are these nominees or honorable mentions? If these are honorable mentions, and if Ninetales is worse than Politoed, then why isn't Ninetales on this list? I need an answer, bruh. Don't leave me hanging.
Pyroar, a new Pokemon introduced in Gen 6, with a unique typing that doesn't do it any favors, stat distribution which is admittedly confusing and somewhat contradicts the first thing you would think of when you think about a lion, and 3 abilities that do not help those stats in any way, shape, or form. It is truly a disappointing Pokemon that has at least broken 1 or 2 hearts since its introduction. And Slurpuff, a new Pokemon introduced in Gen 6, a fairy type who was literally a cross between a poodle and a cupcake, with meh stats across the board, okay abilities, and an okay move pool, is a fine example of just an okay Pokemon, and proof that regardless of what version you bought, you were going to get at least one meh fairy type in your game.
Keep this in mind, failed in every sense of the word. Also, says Slurpuff is okay, has potential to be number 1 on this list. Okay.
Okay, is this a top 10 or a top 13? If you said that they're nominees, then why are they not on this list? That's the point of nominees. They're supposed to be runner-ups for the #1 spot. But if these were meant to be taken as honorable mentions, then that defeats the purpose of nominees. I get you're trying to make an Oscars theme here, but just say that they're honorable mentions if they're meant to be taken as such. If this is secretly a top 13, then make it a top 13. Nominees aren't honorable mentions. Get it right.
And the winner is Pyroar! Yes, Pyroar in every sense of the word is a grand loser of Gen 6. Everything about it says it should be physical, or at least a mixed attacker. But instead, it has a physical attack stat that is weaker than a Sunflora. It has a move pool that's incredibly limited, and despite having 3 different abilities, none of them actually help or assist Pyroar, with the creme de la creme being Moxie, an ability that would boost its physical attack. However, it only has an attack stat so weak that the boost ultimately would not matter. If this was supposed to be a special attack version of Moxie that was never introduced, perhaps that would explain a lot of things and might actually salvage Pyroar. But as it stands, despite having unique gender differences between male and female, a pretty cool design overall, it is ultimately a deceptive and incredibly disappointing Pokemon. And as far as this committee is concerned, comprising entirely of myself, it is, without any doubt, the loser of Gen 6. And to you, Pyroar, the grand, golden, dubious disc. Here's hoping that Gen 7 does something to salvage you. Anything, including just changing Moxie into a special attack version of said ability, because that alone would be enough to save you, but as it stands now, good lord, are you still incredibly heartbreaking.
Said that Pyroar failed every sense of the word. Says it has a pretty cool design overall. Man, no need to shoot your other foot, you only got one since you blew off the other. Seriously, by this logic, something like your Avalonian entry could have been higher, since you gave more of a reason to have that on your #1 entry. I agree that Pyroar is a pretty bad Pokemon, but man, you're all over the place. Anyways, there isn't anything to add afterwards, as it's pretty much the end of the video, so we might as well say our final thoughts. Since Mr. Pyroar is my guest for today, I'll let him go first.
Well, this was a fucking mess of a list. Not only did your video suffer from lazy research from Diantha and X and Y's story to being downright whiny via the battle tower, but it was also incredibly confusing as well. What counts as a loser? A Pokemon? A character? Just anything? That seemed to be the case when you threw the battle tower in just to symbolize your distaste for Gen 6. Is Gen 6 perfect? Fuck no, but if you're looking for a reason not to like it, this video will give you little reason to do so. If I'd recommend anything, I'd recommend he adds rules so his next list won't be such a clusterfuck like this one was.
Alright, I'll admit one thing. This is far from the worst countdown I've seen. Hell, I've known I've seen worse. You at least have substance that I could understand why these things are on your list, minus a couple of them, and your overall quality isn't half bad. However, to put it bluntly, this is probably one of the most frustrating videos I had the displeasure of watching. First off, this list is just all over the place. Some of these entries were really confusing, and it honestly felt like some of them could have been higher or lower. A good example being your leftovers entry and your reasoning why it's on this list. It only comes off as odd and was just questionable overall, but something like your Politoed and Diantha entry is much lower, which is weird because you honestly give more of a reason why they're on the list, more so than your leftovers entry. Speaking of, the second issue with this video is that your points and reasoning or overall lackluster come off as pretty damn petty, especially when we're talking about your second entry. Some of them felt justified, but others didn't. It also didn't help that your overall presentation and explanations just felt clumsy and poor. I also had a really hard time trying to understand your reasoning, but when I did, your explanations still sucked and sometimes felt childish. Finally, your constant drag down points and unnecessary padding were just a chore to sit through. You honestly could have explained all this much consistently, because after a while it just became annoying and it just started to bore me. Something like your Politoed mini hate montage, which is unneeded, and your nominees could have just been said and done rather quickly. If there were any advice I could give, it'd just be me repeating what I said for my Oriza commentary, but I think it should be applied here as well. You need to work on your overall presentation and explanations, as some of them could have been said much better and less clumsily handled. Also, try to not to drag out your points and cut down with the excessive padding so that way it won't be as annoying to sit through. Lastly, you need to think more on your entries. If you felt like some of your entries didn't have enough reasons to be higher, either think for more concrete reasons, or just move them around on the list until there's a good enough spot that you think is most suited. I also think there's potential in your content, and hopefully this commentary has helped you in some way. Well, that was fun. Did you have fun, Mr. Pyroar?
Can I just go back to Alola?
Yeah, I held your hotches here long enough.
This isn't... That motherfucker!
Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I had fun making this commentary with Mr. Pyroar. He's a really cool dude, probably even cooler now, so feel free to give his channel a watch. As always, if you guys have any feedback or criticism, feel free to say in the comment section below, or even make a commentary on this video if you so choose. I'm open to it. This has been Sky, and I'll see you guys some other time, so please, do take care.
Also, what exactly was the joke? Unfair to predict another joke.
It took a whole good minute of fast-forwarding just for this semi-redundant point. Boy! You knew...
Christ, what a whiny little shit. You mentioned how you expected auras to be like Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. And like Heart Gold and Soul Silver, they do the same story. You still fight Team Aqua and Team Aqua. Fuck these names, dude! Christ, what a whiny little shit. You mentioned how you expected auras to be like Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. And like Heart Gold and Soul Silver, they do the same story. You still fight Team Magma. Dude! This is so long! Fuck me! Christ, what a whiny little shit. You mentioned how you expected auras to be like Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. And like Heart Gold and Soul Silver, they do the same story. You still fight Team Magma. Evil organizations! Fuck it! It's evil organizations now. Christ, what a whiny little shit. You mentioned how you expected auras to be like Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. And like Heart Gold and Soul Silver, they do the same story. You still fight the evil organization. Depending on your version, you still have to save Hoenn from one of the Weather Trio. And you still have to fight Steven. And you pass and go to get $200. But what about Emerald? That's what the dubs... blah, 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 blah.